Welcome to the Whiskey Congress. Honest, open talk dedicated to speaking the truth to those who are open to hearing it. Black, white, right, left. Most importantly, honest, bold, and fueled by good whiskey. In Whiskey Veritas, we are Whiskey Congress. Join the evolution.
Whiskey Congress is back in session. Stephen and I are together in the Cleveland studio. A lot went on right after we finished recording last week, so I'm feeling like we're playing a little bit of catch up. But first of all, how you doing, man?
I'm good. How about yourself?
I'm doing fine, thank you. So last week we did a show, we didn't discuss Russia at all, and then things went fucking crazy in Russia. So I believe his name is pronounced Prigozhin.
Yes.
Is the head of the Wagner Group, a paramilitary mercenary group that literally turned and started marching on Moscow. On their way, they turn around, probably because of a deal struck with Putin and the Kremlin. It's just the most bizarre thing because he was literally turning the war back against Russia. This is a group, we talk about this I'm talking about this like it's some foreign crazy concept. We have the same thing here. We have Blackwater, which is a huge paramilitary mercenary group that we used in Iraq, got them kicked out of Iraq. They changed their name and went back. So this concept of private military groups is not unique to Russia, and it kind of perked my ears up a bit in terms of what could happen if things got crazy in our country. Go ahead.
I mean, I guess, there's a little bit, it's a weird situation for sure, because, from what I read is that it was a protest, right? It was a protest march against the Russian government because, I guess the Russians, dropped bombs that killed some members of the Wagner Group, and maybe there were some issues with some of the people from the Wagner Group getting paid. So they turned and marched towards Moscow as a protest, saying they basically wanted better terms and conditions and better, safety from these sort of things, and to show Putin just exactly I guess his other point was, he gave Putin certain instructions on how they should have done this and how they could have ended it quickly. Putin didn't follow his lead, and so now everything has been drawn out. So his point was, not only do you put us in danger and maybe you haven't paid us, but I'm going to show you how you should have done this invasion by doing it to you to show you just how weak of a position that you had put yourself in. And, they got to a certain point where he said he made the decision to stop because they didn't want to mutiny and that it was just to prove a point, and he got his point across. I don't know if I buy it.
Did you buy it either?
I don't know if I buy it. I mean, something bizarre happened though, right? Because why turn on them? Why do the march? Why stop? Why is he now exiled to Ukraine or what? It's just
Belarus.
Or Belarus, I'm sorry, yeah.
Steve, and that's actually kind of a point I wanted to make, is we don't have a clue what's really going on. I heard people speculating that this whole thing was planned by Putin to see who was loyal to him and who wasn't, which, given Putin's background, wouldn't shock me. I watched about 30 seconds of Prigozhin's, speech, whatever, his video. But he's not speaking a language I understand. And it wasn't getting translated. And I'm thinking to myself, you could tell me, if you translated and put anything on the bottom of the screen, I wouldn't know any better. So it could be, Yeah. And so the whole we don't really know what's happening thing is just all I can think of in this case. It could be Prigozhin and Putin working together. It could be Prigozhin saying, fuck this guy, I'm going for the throne, realizing he's not going to succeed and my family's going to die. I don't know, and I don't know how to find out.
But here's the problem, though, right? So he said what he said, there's a translator, and it's just you're not trusting what your eyes are showing you. And that's a big part of the problem. It's a big part of the problem with U.S. media, obviously world media, is that so many of us now are doubting what we're seeing, what we're hearing, and for good reason. Right? It's for good reason. And so we have to really, whenever we're taking in information from the media, as it relates to, current events in real time, we have to start to figure out ways to validate and vet this information. And I don't know, there's an argument to be said. Like, part of our problem is that, most of us only really speak one language.
Yeah.
Right. And so,
especially Americans.
Right. Like, well, no, I'm speaking specifically about Americans. Okay. Right.
When I was in Europe, they told me there's if you speak 3 languages, you're trilingual. 2 languages, you're bilingual. 1 language, you're American.
Right. But I mean, like, there would be value if we spoke. If we learned, it'd probably be wise for, people to go out and get Rosetta Stone or Babbel or whatever these language, and I don't know, learn Russian and Mandarin.
We have Google Translate, by the way, which I've only used a few times, but it's amazing.
But I feel, the reason why I'm saying that is that, like, but would you trust that? Right, because there are people who would question the translation of a Google because they feel that Google is left wing and blah 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 blah. So at what point do you just have to, like, all right, fine, I gotta fucking learn Russian, I gotta learn Mandarin, and maybe I gotta learn
Spanish, probably go pretty long way.
Or Arabic.
Oh yeah.
I mean, like, just because it's just like, like Spanish is one that maybe you don't have to learn because there's enough people who know it. Where
true.
You know what I mean? Like,
true. If
right.
I
Like,
find
if they're saying something and they're translating something different, like, there's enough people I know who, have nothing to do with politics who would be like, that ain't what he's saying, right? I just go grab one of the dudes at my gym and just like, hey, what did he just say, right? Are they translating this right? But when it comes to some of the other languages, like I said, Russian, Mandarin, Arabic, something like that, I'm not saying that it's an easy task that we could all go do, but, like, that's one of the ways I could think of trying to verify some of this, because we're so reliant on someone else telling us what that person is saying, and because there's so much distrust, it's just like, I don't know what's going on.
You're right. And I'm not normally, I don't trust the media guy.
Right.
But in this case, I'm like, this is getting said, and I'm being told that's what he's saying, and I have no fucking clue. Right. But I actually ran into someone from your gym the other day, by the way. One of the barbacks at my Irish pub. Okay. Sporting an OSI shirt, so I stopped him and talked about it. All right, let's move on to, speaking of OSI.
Did he know me?
He did not know you by name.
Okay.
He said he might know who you are, but and I said big black guy with glasses. He's like, well, big guy in my gym doesn't really narrow it down.
But anyway, but to that point, I mean, that's a really unique situation, because whatever the reasoning was behind it, it did expose Putin, and it exposed Russia to show how weak they were, right? Like, this is the equivalent in football, right, to saying, all right, I'm going to take the ball and I'm going to run it right up the middle and you can't stop me. I mean, like, we're just going to run.
Take the heart out of the team,
right? Like, we're going to run off tackle to the right over and over and over again, and you can't stop me. Just to show how weak your defense is, and that's what the Wagner,
whatever,
the paramilitary troop group out of Russia or Ukraine or whoever they are. But that was the point that they were trying to make, right? And they made it. So, but that.
Then Putin in return made and I can ruin your family.
True, but I mean, I think his point was, maybe you can, but if I can take over your country and have you on the run, I can eventually get to you, and once you're dead, I don't really give a fuck what you think you can do to my family because you're dead, right? So I'm going to kill you, I'm going to kill any Russian oligarchs that were friends of yours, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do all those terrible things that you say you're going to do to my family and their family's family. I'm going to do it to you and yours. Because I can. I've proven I can. What you've proved is that you don't know shit about warfare, Vlad.
And that's a point we made relatively early after the invasion of Ukraine. Like, you and I think both kind of said, Vladimir Putin's so smart, and yeah, he's a brilliant intelligence spy. He knows that game. He clearly does not know warfare and does not know the military, and those things don't translate directly, apparently.
Yeah.
And I think Putin's got a really harsh taste of reality when it comes to there's shit you know and there's shit you don't, and you've entered into the don't zone.
Right. I mean, and with Putin on this one, especially, it's you should have listened to your generals. You should have listened to, the people who have done this before. Now, there's also an argument. Like, look, I mean, they've had engagement in places like Syria and places like Africa and whatever, but they don't have a ton of extensive war experience anymore, right? Like, I mean,
certainly not against a military that could fight back.
Exactly. I mean, and so, and that's my one thing with China. Now, the issue with China is that they just have so many people that even if their strategy sucks and training sucks, that it's just there's so many bodies that they could throw at you. But a big question I have about China when it comes to warfare exactly is how ready are their soldiers to fight, right? Like, how good is their military strategy? Like, when is the last time China has actually been in a fight, right? Where they've had to actually do or show anything. And we don't know, right? And I think it's a valid question.
No, it's a valid question, but also technology has become the forefront of warfare. And when it comes to technology, China's doing pretty good.
Right, but
and I think Russia might suffer
and you could also argue but they've stolen a lot of it, right?
Okay.
So it's a technology that we have that they stole from us.
Not denying that.
And it's not, and all that's to say is that like they've got a lot of technology, but so do we
in technology infrastructure,
right?
Which is what we're working on. That's something that we've lacked, that we really got exposed for during the pandemic. Is if we need to make our own components for high tech anything.
Right.
We're not doing well. And that's actually something that's gone in our favor over the last several years as a necessity, because we got exposed for our inability to produce components for technology. All right, but I wanted to move on to the Supreme Court because, first of all, this is your bailiwick. But a couple of big decisions came out this week.
Yeah, so we had a few. I guess we start with the religious freedom case out of Colorado, which is really, really, there's some questions there about that one. So you had a website designer who alleged that she got a request from a gay couple for her to design their wedding website, but because they were gay, it went against her religious freedoms or her religious beliefs, and so she sues. And it goes to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court decides in her favor that she shouldn't be forced to do something that goes against her religious beliefs in making a website for a gay couple. Now, that there's plenty of controversy about that because the argument is, well, people can just throw. Well, it's against my religious belief out there, and just use that as a precursor for discrimination against whatever they want. Right? Whether it be race or, like, I don't want to serve short people, right? Or I don't want to serve guys with bald heads. Or just pick it, right? Like, so, so there's plenty of beef with that, right? And the decision, and again, it feels like another attack on the LGBTQ community, where that's one less way in which that they are protected, and given with states passing rules against trans people and their various rights and access, that feels real, right? But the drama behind this case, or the scandal, or whatever you want to call it, the conflict, which is beyond sort of the courtroom, is if she actually had standing to bring the case, because the person who is said to have who made the inquiry about her making the website for he and his partner is a guy named Michael Stewart, and allegedly Michael Stewart was planning a wedding with his male partner, and asked her to design the website for them, and she said no, and then proceeded to sue because of Colorado law said she would have had to do it. But when the person who she said that this claim was based off of, right? Like, so here's the guy who made the inquiry online. Here's his information. So there you go. So then media tracked him down and said, hey, what do you think about this court decision? And he's like, yeah, weird thing is, I didn't make that inquiry. And not only did I not make it, I'm already married, and I'm married to a woman. I've been married to her for 15 years, and I'm a web designer, so I could make my own website if I needed to. But again, I'm already married to a woman that I've been married to for 15 years, and this case started down the...
Which I just can't get my head around. How did it make it to the Supreme Court?
Well, that's what inquiring minds would like to know, Jim.
Okay.
Right? Like, I mean,
so I'm
because...
not crazy. We're going,
well, no, because there has to be an actual grievance to be resolved, right? And you don't have one in this case if that's true, right? It's based off theory. Now, people are like, well, they stipulated to that early on. Like, what do you... No. That's
stipulated to us not
you stipulated to that, well, it's not a real case, but we're going to try it in theory anyway, and then change laws and access to rights based off of a stipulation on a theoretical event that didn't happen. That's not how our justice system works, right? That's not how civil procedure works. And there are legitimate questions about it. But the problem is, this is the Supreme Court. There's no one to appeal to, right? Like, so that's it, right? Like that, like, and so we don't have anything adjacent to the Supreme Court to come back and say, you know, that you got to do it over. Right. Like it's a really, really bad situation. And I think that, I mean, obviously I think that this is going to hold up. This is going to stand. It shouldn't have, but it's a direct assault on our judicial system and process. And it's taking us further down this road of the illegitimacy of government, by some of these bad faith actors, right? Like, and if you're doing something that you know shouldn't be allowed, but because you want to make this political statement, you allow it to happen, right? Like, that is political corruption, right? Sure. Like, you may not, it's not, you know, Batman in Gotham City corruption with, you know, some bad guy smoking a cigar, taking money from mom and pop shops, but this is actually way worse, right? Because it literally is undermining a branch of our government, that being the Supreme Court, but they're doing it from within, right?
I just find it amazing that this didn't get shot down at multiple levels.
Yeah, but that's what a lot of people are saying. Like, listen, I'm an attorney, but there's attorneys way smarter than me, way more into the world of constitutional law. This is what they do and they practice every day, that are asking the same questions. How do we get to this point, right? Like, how is this? How are you? You know, like, how was this not a red flag? And you know, there should have been a whole discussion like this. You know, the fact this case's ability to even move forward should possibly be something that could be argued before the Supreme Court before we even get to the point, the actual matter at hand.
Yeah, it you know, I bring up the movie Idiocracy all the time, but this feels like another Idiocracy moment where now the Supreme Court is ruling on cases founded on bullshit. And to be fair, when you get to that level, you just kind of assume, I guess, that, oh, this person named in this suit is a real human who really did this. And you just can't do that.
I just think that almost that almost kind of minimizes it or trivializes it in a way, because this is not because I feel that this was intentional. Right,
sure.
Like, the way you're referencing it is almost like it was like an oversight. Like, how do we do this? Like, somebody made a mistake. Like, you would think there would be vetting and verification, but I believe that this was intentional. That everyone knew this going up and agreed, and it was more important to make this political statement, right, in the form of a Supreme Court decision than to actual because they.
Yeah, I guess
you know what I mean. Like,
the originator knew they were full of shit. And
right.
they still went with it. And Steve, it probably is one of those things that spiraled out of control. It probably got started as I'm going to do this in my local thing to make my city, my county, my state, whatever, you know, show that we're not tolerating this queer stuff. And all of a sudden, oh, shit.
No, I don't think so. I think that this was a very intentional sort of thing from the get-go. I think that this is a part of an agenda on the right, and I think what they wanted to see was they knew that they knew the outcome that they wanted. They knew that the standard process of getting that before the Supreme Court to get that outcome may not actually happen. So what they did was they manufactured a scenario and tested it out and said,
okay.
What if...
But don't you think they were shocked when it got as high as it did?
Okay, yeah, fine, but it did.
True.
Right? The fact that it did, and it got all... Because, listen, this is the Supreme Court, and there's no way, right, that they wouldn't have verified, that they wouldn't have gone through the process of verifying the actors, right, at hand. Like, you just...
You like to think that, but apparently, in this case, this would seem to be an instance where...
what is the... If you think, like... So then, if it wasn't intentional, then that means that, like, so when they get questioned on this, they're going to have to acknowledge that they didn't vet, they didn't verify, that they just assumed that it happened, in lower courts, and so they're basically going to have to acknowledge and admit that they didn't do their job.
Yes. Well, but again, I think if you're at that level, you think, okay, I don't need to worry about the validity of the person bringing... You would think, if it gets to that level, that has been done. And clearly, in this case, it was not.
So, again, no. If they do that, and they know that they ruled on a case where you didn't actually have an injury, and they just gave out a result that resolves that injury, but there was no injury, then shouldn't they be asking themselves if their decision is correct? Right. But they're not going to do that. And I just find it hard to believe that that now it's just like, well, we made our decision, the decision is final, even though that decision is based on bullshit. Right? If you're like, that's the answer if you're a corrupted Supreme Court. Like, if you're not, then you say we have to figure out a way to make this right, to remedy this, right? Because we provided a remedy to something that didn't exist, and now, like, the law of the land is going to be based off of a false situation.
I think you're giving them too much credit. I think what you're saying, I think, is valid and logical, but we've seen enough from Supreme Court justices to realize that they are in fact human, they are in fact fallible, and in some cases flat out corrupt. And I mean, some stuff with Clarence Thomas and who recently got busted for taking luxury trips. Oh, God. Anyway.
Oh, Alito,
thank you. I was like, Scalia was in my head. I'm like, well, he's dead, so that, I didn't mean Alito. They are a fallible organization, and like you said, there's no check and balance on them. They are at the top of the food chain. And they also came out and made some other rulings this week, including one to strike down Joe Biden's student loan forgiveness, which I think is the best thing could ever happen to Joe Biden.
Look,
I'll justify that in a moment, but
look, it's that was the right decision. He didn't have the power to do it, and it's unfortunate, but he didn't have the power or the authority to do it. I don't think the arguments for it were good or strong. If you remember back when this first came out and everybody was all excited about it, I didn't even bother to do any of the paperwork. One, because the amount was so small compared to my student loan debt that it didn't really make a difference, and it literally wasn't worth the time.
Yep.
Right? Like, it was not worth the time to save, $15 a month on a student loan payment that is north of $1,200. Sorry, I don't give a shit. Like, $1 is $1, but go fuck yourself. My time is literally worth more.
I haven't canceled my Netflix for the same reason.
Right.
But
at the same time, like I also felt like he didn't have the authority to do it, and that this was probably going to be the outcome. And I was correct, right? Like, so I saved myself time by not filling all that stuff out, and so now we're here. But something good did come out of it because, what the court said is like, look, you can change the program, but you can't like completely, just punt the program.
Unilaterally say, okay,
exactly. So what they did is they went in and they changed the program and they made it way more beneficial and just sensible for borrowers, especially high loan amount borrowers like myself, and really made it beneficial for people like me, right? Like I'm in a position where I'm starting a business. I don't have a lot of income or revenue. And so making my student loan payment, like when those kick back in, if I had to make my student loan payment today, I couldn't do it, right? But the way the new program is set up, then I can still get credit for making payments, even if I'm making no money and I'm making no payments. And there's different ways to get your loans forgiven after a certain amount of time and a certain amount of payments. So I think this actually ends up being better because like the little $10,000 off of a student loan bill that's $180,000, I'm sorry, was nothing to me because the way that the interest is accruing on it, it just didn't do much for me. But now with the way that they've allowed for these different credits to be applied and different adjustments, not deferments, but literally adjustments based on your income, right? And in real time, so it's not just based off last year. It's based off of what's happening right now in the moment. Essentially, it brings more people into the fold and benefits more people. So it's an unfortunate situation, but I honestly think it's better than even what he was originally proposing that got struck down.
Here's why I say it's the best thing that could happen to Biden is that, and I'm going to quote you and say, elections have consequences. You say that all the time, and you're right. But people generally ignore that reality. And there have been a few major events that have shown, elections do have consequences in the form of Supreme Court justice appointees, Roe v. Wade being overstruck, or whatever, and now this, and these are both things where liberals are saying, "Hey, you right-leaning normal Republican voters who thought that these things would never go against you, here it's happening against you," and I think that will swing voters in a way where they're like, "Okay, I might not like Biden, but Trump's court did this." And so I think it's a good thing for him. And I've said before, and I'll say it again, I don't want Biden to run for re-election. I know he's going to, but I think it's a bad move. And the Democratic Party should be looking for a good heir apparent, and they're not doing that. And it's frustrating. And every time I open a fucking political or anything political on my YouTube, I get Joe Biden popping up saying, "Hey, want to help my campaign get off to a great start?" I'm like, Joe, I really don't.
Right.
You're a much bigger detractor to Biden than I am, but I think if you look at his record, you'd have to say his administration is doing a pretty good job. Having said that, Joe, you're going to be almost 80. Hang him up, bro.
My issue, especially now, I mean, I thought that the baggage with Biden was going to be problematic, right? And I was right? Like his past record, and frankly, his son, Hunter Biden, have been weaponized against him.
Sure.
And they've been very effective. And then you take into account his age. I don't think that there's anyone out there who could say, like, look, man, dude is slowing down. He's not the guy that he was, 10, 15 years ago. And, like, those things matter, right? Like, and I just think you're going to have a tough time with the way that his, it should just be about the policy. It should just be about the
results,
the results and things that you could quantify. And he's done a good job with some of the policy decisions that he's made. Yeah, he had some gaps. The pullout of Afghanistan wasn't good. Like some of the stuff with like some of the stuff that he's gotten back and forth in with the the environmental stuff and the gas pipeline,
right.
all that other stuff, like those, all that stuff is ugly. But like generally, most of those, if you're looking at it objectively, they've made some good moves that could justify him coming back. But I could see not wanting him back on some of the policy things. But ultimately, for me, it's again the extra baggage and his age. Right, and I'm sorry, this is a top job. Like, we can't just say, like, oh, we'll give him a pass on this, give him a pass on that. It's the President of the United States, right? Like, the bar should be high.
Yes.
Right? Like, so we got to get somebody else in there who doesn't have, right, that we know of, the same sort of bullshit, right? Which is, like, shitty baggage of, crack-addicted son that's throwing your name around, the international community, trying to get himself rich, and your past policy decisions that are clearly racist. In some instances,
and Steve,
right?
That's what, if I'm running against Joe Biden, I'm digging back into
throwing all that stuff, right? And they didn't do a great job of that last time around. Not to
probably
say that,
because it doesn't appeal to their base.
Exactly, but I mean, it's
they're gaining by Joe Biden's a racist. And his numbers go up in Alabama.
It's just like, that's tricky for them because then he would get support from our people. But
you know what I'm laughing at is kind of gross what I'm laughing at, but it's true.
Yeah, it is. I mean, like, that's the other thing. So anyway, we got a little bit off the rails, but, the student loan thing, I think, worked out the best that it could for Joe Biden.
And maybe for the people that was supposed to benefit. So,
I think better. Yeah, I mean, I think the big thing is, I think it actually ends up being a better situation, like I said, for people like myself, and other students out there, and it is better, right? Because just even if he was successful in doing that, just discharging all those loans. I mean, the people, like, I get the PPP loans and everyone else, like, we paid for all that stuff, and it's true. We did, and it's bullshit. But, fine, we did it, right? Like, I'm not going to, good for those people that they were able to figure it out. But it does put, that's a lot of money that they were going to put, and it's got to be paid some way, shape, or form, and ultimately, the people are the ones who pay that bill. So directly doing it that way, and this is coming from a person with a massive student loan debt bill, right?
Yeah. And I think you made an important point, though. This bill or bills of this nature are intended to relieve economic stress on people who will then spend money and do things and stimulate the economy.
Yes.
And if you're telling me that this thing will just save you $15 a month, fine. Right. Next time we go out, you can buy me a sandwich and a beer, and maybe.
I could buy you a sandwich or a beer, but you're not getting both.
And that's the point. If it's not actually providing relief, then what's it really doing?
But the new bill, I think it's called the SAVE bill, and how it would change it once that goes into effect. Like that is the type of thing that saves a person like me, because like I can't discharge my student loans and. Like when I can't like file for bankruptcy and have them discharged, thanks to Joe Biden.
Okay.
Did you know that?
I did not.
So Joe Biden advocated heavily for the ability to lend to students without.
He was a senator, probably.
Yeah, when he was a senator. This is in the 70s.
Okay.
Right?
Yep.
So he advocated 70s and the 80s. He advocated heavily for lenders to be able to lend to students, not need income. Not needing to meet any sort of income standards, could lend, whatever amount the student needed. Like there were no you need money for college, bam, you're going to get it, right? So he advocates for that, but then on the flip side, advocates and says, under no circumstances can you discharge student loans through bankruptcy or any other way. Have to be paid out. So essentially, it's like, oh yeah, here you can get all this money. Oh, and if you get a job where you can't pay it back, well, everybody else who gets any other type of loan. They can go into bankruptcy, but you cannot, right? Like, so then...
And Steve, this actually kind of hits home with me. This is where our age gap matters, because when I was a student, getting a student loan was very tough. Mm-hmm. And I was in a spot where my family made too much money for me to get a loan, but not enough for whatever, and also tuition was way less than it is now. But it was really hard to get government money for college. Fast forward 10 years, they were just winging it out there. And you can see it in towns like Morgantown, West Virginia, where I went to school. And I would bet in Amherst, Massachusetts, where you went to school. Mm-hmm. Where, like, when I was in college, I knew every 10-cent wing night and every $1.50 Budweiser night because that's how I had to get by. There are now 3 martini bars in Morgantown, West Virginia. We don't need 3 martini bars.
Right.
But there's another, or that. But it's funny because, like, when you're in college, you want to take a girl on a fancy date. And when I was in college, it was like, okay, there's one steakhouse and then these other places that are kind of the next level. And now they're everywhere because money's getting thrown into college towns like it's going out of style because of student loans. And someone's going to have to pay it back eventually, but it ain't going to be us.
Yeah,
I'm sorry for a side tangent, but,
right, but I mean,
you see the impact.
Yeah, no, totally. But so it's interesting. Like, he introduces this bill that I think is pretty good. But part of the reason we're in this situation is because of actions by Joe Biden in his days as a senator. In the late 70s and the early 80s. So again, like I said, obviously I'm not a fan of Joe Biden.
Yes.
This bill helps.
You've been clear on that.
Right, like this bill helps, but again, it's the problem that you created, Joe, so thanks. And then they also ruled on affirmative action with the Harvard and University of North Carolina cases, saying that universities could not use race as a sole determining factor in new admissions into colleges. Look, this is, I think that this is definitely feels like an assault on a lot of the gains that have been made in the civil rights movement. You've got attack on the LGBT community. You've got, with the student loan situation, essentially attack on, the middle class and lower middle class. And then with this, it's a direct sort of middle finger to black, kids trying to get into college. And some people will say, well, why do you even need this? Like, it should just be based on merit. But, like, look, you've got a country and you've got institutions with history, long history of discriminating intentionally against students solely based on their race, right? You've got hundreds of years of history of this, right? Like over the last, like you've got 50 years, 60, 70 years in this, in this one, and then, 100 years before, to the point where they had to have whole separate colleges for black students called historically black colleges and universities because they weren't allowed into white schools. And then when segregation was, outlawed and they had to let them in, they were still real big dicks about letting black kids in, even if they were qualified. So that doesn't just get fixed and turned around because you allowed for affirmative action, 20 years ago. That's a long history to sort of unfuck. And so with this, a lot of people are saying, well, I mean, black kids shouldn't even need it. No, there's no such thing as racism. Everybody's colorblind now. And this hurts white students, and it's not fair to white students. And so we have to get rid of it because the playing field now needs to always be level. Right? Now it always needs to be level. We know we fucked you guys over before, but now, like, we're cool now. So everything has to be level all the time now. No one can be disadvantaged, right? Ever. Right. Like that's the argument.
And I don't know that you were specifically poking me with a stick for me to talk about the legacy system. But I've always said, you want to get rid of affirmative action? Okay. First, let's get rid of legacies. Because so much of our lives are impacted by the legacy system.
Yep.
George W. Bush doesn't get into Harvard based on George W. Bush's merits. He got in there because of
Yale.
He went to Harvard undergrad and Yale graduate student. I think both.
Okay.
But anyway.
Either way, yeah.
He got there because of who Daddy was.
Yep.
And his daddy was actually a really... I always end up extolling the virtues of George H.W. Bush, who did some things that are questionable, but at the same time, that dude had a resume.
Yeah.
W did not, and yet got into Harvard.
I mean, he was governor.
He was governor because he went to Yale. He fucked up everything he touched.
I know.
All right.
But then
he becomes governor because of all the things I'm saying.
Yes.
If George W. Bush and I'm
just saying, by the time he got to the White House, his resume looked pretty good, but it was because of the legacy.
Yes.
Here's the thing. You are right. You are absolutely right on that. But the bottom line is that, like, the legacy system is allowed to stay in place. The affirmative action is not. And it is, I think, and that goes to show again this attack on some of the gains we've made from a civil rights standpoint that need to be addressed. Now, my argument is for, as it relates to, specifically affirmative action, is like, look, that's a blow. But one of the things I think that we have to now turn from a society standpoint is say, all right, if they're going to take that away, right, you continue to try to fight for it best you can, try to get creative with ways to make sure that, qualified students are getting into universities, qualified students of color, however you got to do that. But I also think that you also have a larger issue before you even get to this point when we're talking about the education of, children of color, specifically black kids that come from inner cities, poor communities, things like that. Because, and I use my hometown, Youngstown, as an example. K through 12, 17%. 17% of students in K through 12 in Youngstown are reading proficient.
Wait, say it again?
17% of the students in the Youngstown City School District, K through 12, are reading proficient.
So they're reading at the grade that they should be reading at.
Right.
And so
So
less than 1 in 5.
Yeah. So
Wow.
if you have 100 students in the Youngstown City School System, 17 of them can read at the level that they're supposed to be able to read at. Right?
That's
when it comes to math, 8% K through 12 proficient in math. Okay?
All right.
So now, Youngstown, the demographics are about a 50-50 split in terms of black-white. All right, but most of the white kids do not go to the inner city schools. They go to the private schools like the one that I went to, and or they go out to the suburbs. But
you're making me think of a comedian I saw.
Well, hold on. I don't want to lose the point. So if you've got only 8 and 17% of your kids are able to do math and read at the level that they're supposed to, but you have an 85% graduation rate, then what that tells me is that you got kids, most of your kids who graduate aren't ready for college. They can't read or do math, right? We're fighting for this affirmative action for the kids who are qualified. They should get in and they shouldn't get discriminated against. Fine. But I also have an issue with how many kids are we sending that are even ready for this, right? So you got a bigger fucking problem on your hands that you need to start to address. And look, not to say that you haven't tried, right? And because we know that the schools need more money, we know that we need more teachers, we know that we need smaller classrooms and smaller numbers, but we need to start to get this shit. Because right now, you've got kids that are leaving high school that literally can't read and that cannot do math, right? 8% of your kids can do math. 17% of your kids can read at the level that they're supposed to when they leave. And you got 85% of your kids totally graduating. So when you do the math on that, 60% of your kids don't know what the fuck that they can't do the basic skills that they need to do anything. Right? More or less get into fucking college. They can't work at McDonald's at this point.
And in kind of bringing things all around, they're getting into college, and the colleges are like, we're happy to take your money, and we'll push you through just like your high school did. Yeah, sure, here's a degree. Good luck with that.
Yep. Here's a degree.
And here's $100,000 in debt, too.
Right.
You're welcome.
Or even if it's not $100,000, even if it's 25 or even if it's 50, if you get a degree in general social studies or whatever, right, then chances are, what are your options? Where are you going to go work? You can go be a bank teller, maybe. You can go try to work for some nonprofit that's going to pay you $12 an hour.
Run up a ton of debt to work as a bank teller and make
right.
$50
Either way, you're looking at a career where unless you're fortunate, right, or your choices are you're looking to try to get in the local government, right, to work for the county or to work for the city or something like that. Or you're at some low-level, low-paying job where they'll tell you all about how you can work your way up, but realistically, you will not work your way up. There'll be a few that do, but for the most part, a majority don't, right? And then you're stuck with this debt, and you'll never make enough to pay it off, and you're in financial ruin, and
good luck.
The cycle continues, right? Because you have a kid that you then can't help in any way, shape, or form at the next level. You can't help pay for their education. You don't have the money to put them into a better high school so they have better chances. Then they go to college and they get the debt, and then the cycle repeats itself over and over and over again.
It's a snowball. It gains mass as it rolls.
Right. And so, I just think we have to start to, yes, the affirmative action thing needs to be addressed, but
Can I tell you the Youngstown joke?
Yeah.
It's not my joke. Don't get mad at me. But someone said that Youngstown is if Detroit and West Virginia had a baby.
Yeah, I mean, listen. I know what my hometown is.
Hey, look, I'm from Buffalo.
I do. I know what it is. I mean, it's just like it's. Yeah,
that's
okay,
a good joke,
right?
Right,
I mean, like it's just like you're kicking a dead horse, right? Like, I mean, we've been through enough, man. Like, what the fuck?
I'm not trying to pile on. I just thought that was a funny joke.
I just told you that most of the people in my town can't fucking read or do math. Like, if you
know
wrote
what,
that joke down,
okay,
they couldn't fucking read it.
Thanks.
Kick me while I'm fucking down.
I'm sorry.
Jesus.
I'm sort of sorry. I'm a bad person. All right, we got to talk about Ron DeSantis' ad before we go.
Okay, so
this is
Ron
amazing.
DeSantis puts out this ad through his like war room on Twitter, right? And so it's he acknowledges that the Twitter account that says DeSantis's War Room is directly affiliated with Ron DeSantis. They're the rapid response team for his 2024 presidential campaign, and they put out this ad it's a Ron DeSantis ad that targets Donald Trump and shows how Donald Trump supported LGBTQ rights and the trans community, his friendship with Caitlyn Jenner, his response after the Pulse nightclub shooting, which happened in Orlando, by the way, which is Florida.
Yes.
But then the video, it goes from all these Trump comments on supporting LGBTQ and trans rights and everything else to this weird montage with this weird music of a bodybuilder and Brad Pitt and Troy, Christian Bale and American Psycho, and all these people coming after Ron DeSantis about his anti-LGBTQ stuff, and it was, and then there were some Top Gun references and a lot of here's hot sexy man, then here's Ron DeSantis, here's another hot sexy man, here's Ron DeSantis. It was a weird video ad that has been universally even from gay conservatives who are very who go out of their way to disassociate themselves from the left and say that not everything is homophobic, blah, 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 blah. Even they came out and said, this, Ron DeSantis, this is clearly homophobic. What are you doing? Right?
And here's the thing. You've been waving the flag of the Ron DeSantis is here, he's coming, he's real for a long time.
But
justifiably.
I have, but I've also acknowledged, especially the last 3 months, that this guy is
off the
his
fucking
own
rails.
freaking worst enemy.
Yes, and that's you couldn't have predicted that because he didn't show it until recently.
Right. Well, some people would argue and a lot of people actually did say look, this guy is he may be all those things, but he's gonna fuck it up, right? And I'm I don't know, man. All he's got to do, it was very simple, Jim. All he had to do was actually just not do anything. Right?
He would have followed the Stephen campaign advisor role of just shut the fuck up,
right?
And let Trump destroy himself,
yes,
and do nothing. You'll win, and yet he can't get out of. And I think his ego is so fucking massive, Jim, that he cannot get out of the way.
A picture perfect example of not being able to stop stepping on your own dick, right? It's just unbelievable. So this video,
it's comical. And then Pete Buttigieg responds to it.
And Pete's response is just look, man, I don't want to get into it. And I love how he says, I don't want to speak about, how you make a video of yourself between oiled up bodybuilders.
Oiled up bodybuilders.
With images of you sandwiched in between. But yet you're the one that's anti-gay. I'm not going to touch that. I'm just going to get into the brass tacks of it all. The subtle, not so subtle jabs from Pete Buttigieg.
Pete Buttigieg is a smart guy who knows how to play the game.
I can appreciate him because Pete Buttigieg is he's around my age, right? Maybe a little older.
Yeah,
I think we're close to the same age. So we come out of that sort of dry humor, sarcastic sort of, I love it. It's funny, and he's growing on me, right? I kind of liked him when he ran for president, but I didn't think he was quite like.
No, and he had some
there.
stuff in his time as mayor
Right.
of South Bend that was not great.
Right, and now looking at it, it's just Jesus. But I think that there's something to be said to watch out for him maybe in the next election cycle, not 24, but whatever. So anyway, it was the ad.
It was so
weird.
funny to watch him.
I think it's gonna hurt DeSantis. I think Trump would be smart to, sort of to jab back at him, just like, look, why would I have any issue with gays and trans people that support me and our cause, and that the ones I don't like are these, but as long as you're not that, then I don't care that you're gay or LGBTQ. If that's Trump's message in response to this, then that's another blow for DeSantis, right? I don't know how you could, right? How could
Trump,
it not be?
Trump got away with literally speaking in front of an LGBTQ crowd, hugging a rainbow flag. And then he turns around and shits all over him. But he was able to, that guy's ability to be...
Well, look, he doesn't have to be genuine. I'm not saying Trump needs to be genuine. Exactly. He just needs to say it.
He gets away with not being genuine more than anyone I've ever seen.
Right, but this is an instance where it's just like, look, this is an easy move in the world of campaign. If you want to play, for everybody playing House of Cards at home drinking game, right? Here's an easy way to score some points, and literally just put something out saying, look, we support the LGBTQ community, but what we don't support are the ones that groom children, whatever.
Right, we want to keep.
Right,
Yeah.
But for the rest of them, that's not all of them, and we love you guys, and sorry that Ron DeSantis is a dick, right? Like that's more points for Trump, and that's another fucking complete and utter misstep by DeSantis, not just from the material, like from what he's trying to say, but the way he tried to say it.
It's funny because the standard head up their ass right winger right now, if you say the word Bud Light, they lose their minds. They're like, Bud Light. I'm like, shut the fuck up. I heard that was at a track meet earlier, and I came up a few times. I'm like, oh, fucking A. You people would drink Bud Light because it's garbage beer and you're garbage beer drinkers. But anyway.
And they'll go back to drinking it. Eventually they're going to forget about it and start drinking it again.
There was a guy at the bar the other day I heard say this. He's like, if you thought Bud Light putting that person on a thing was going to make you gay, you were already gay.
Right.
I heard that at a bar in our neighborhood.
And that's actually pretty funny.
It's pretty funny. I almost went like clapping for him, like, you know what? No,
don't make it weird.
Don't engage. Don't engage. All right, man. I was going to talk about Alex Jones saying that Trump's plane is going to get shot down, but is he really worth our time? Okay. Yeah, Alex Jones is trying to become relevant again.
If that does happen, then you can get all the Alex Jones airtime you want anytime you want moving forward. But let's table that one. Yep. I do want to talk to Roseanne. We can talk this one. It'll probably have to be the last one just because of time. But Roseann Barr, my God. So she gets on a podcast and starts ranting off about the media and the lies and standard MAGA stuff. But then says, right, comes out and says like, oh, and like if you think that that 2 million Jews died,
6 million,
6 or whatever she said, like then I got to bridge the story or whatever. Like she basically is saying that the Holocaust didn't happen and all these Jews weren't killed. Now there's an argument that she was being sarcastic. She was trying to. Okay, here's the deal. And I've had this. You go.
So. I've been dreading this for a lot of reasons because you and I have had this fight multiple times about how I'll defend the comedian saying it's a comic trying to be funny. Mm-hmm. And I'm not going to use that defense this time because Roseanne is a comic and she's a very good comic. Mm-hmm. She's also fucking crazy. She's an absolute insane person. So I listened to roughly 45 minutes to an hour of, she was on Theo Von's podcast. And what you queued up was perfect because she was literally talking about how the media and everyone is spinning things so that you can't question the 2020 election. And that's what it was all about. Mm-hmm. And then she, and I'm air quoting, sarcastically says, and the Holocaust never happened. And then she follows up, but it should because Jews ruin everything. And then Theo Von follows up and says, are you Jewish? She said 100%. And it's just, she's just a ranting crazy person who really is not. I'm sympathetic to the fact that she's had a fucked up life. If you know her life story, it is fucking crazy. Yes. And she's had a tough life. And
so did Oprah. And
so did Oprah.
Well, crazy.
No, not that. She's not that level crazy though. No, but
she doesn't take care of a mange.
That was not really Oprah. That was South Park, and you and South Park in reality sometimes merge in places. There have been multiple times, my friend, where you were like, this happened. Oh, wait, that was an episode of South Park. That has actually happened in our conversations. So, boom.
Or American Dad.
Okay.
I have both those issues.
I mean, what she said was ridiculous and stupid and offensive to a lot of people. And if you want to make the argument that she's providing ammunition for right-wing psycho mindset, you can make that case, and I can't defend
Jim, here's the issue, right? Whether she was being sarcastic or not, the problem is she says this on a public forum, it gets put out on social media, and then all you got to do is just look at the comments and the replies below. Right on, finally someone saying the truth.
No. See, this is a realm I usually don't dive into. I sometimes do, but not as much as you.
I mean, like there were people,
it's a value one.
But there are literally people saying, right? Roseann Barr, a Jew, finally admitting what
truth.
We've been saying all along: the Holocaust never happened. You can't prove it. You can't prove we landed on the moon. Right? Like you have those people. Now, it's easy to sit there and dismiss. Those are crazy people. Those are crazy people. Who cares? Those are well. There's a whole bunch of them, and there's more and more of them starting to come out of the woodwork.
Right.
Right, and look,
I mean, if 1% is crazy, that's 30 million people in America.
Exactly. Thank you. Right, like so how many football stadiums does that fill? Right,
a lot.
'Cause it seems to be the only way to fucking get people to understand big numbers. But the point is like, look, whether she meant it sarcastically or not, the fact that there are people who then take that right and say, Roseann Barr just acknowledged it, right? Like, so there's people who took that and put them on other like shows that should be, banned from YouTube and like shouldn't have a platform on podcasts or websites or whatever, and are using that as a rallying cry, right? And it's fucking dangerous, right? Because she can sit there and say after the fact that it was sarcastic, right, or that she didn't really mean it, or she was whatever. But if that creates if there's a consequence of this, where someone then uses that as a reason to say, all right, now we can go do this thing, right? Like that's what you have to think beyond your own little world that you live in, where you want to manipulate and you want to get a narrative out, and that's I get comics and truth and funny and all that other stuff, but this is whether there's a line and she crossed it. And it's just with the history of like Jews and anti-Semitism and the violence against them, and her knowing that, like, it's just so irresponsible.
I will totally give you irresponsible. No, I've got to ask this, and I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but did you know who Theo Von was prior to this?
No.
Okay, I did because I'm a comedy follower, so I knew him from stand-up, whatever. But if you're him, a lot of people are saying, why didn't he shut her down? Why didn't he? I'm like, because this is making him relevant. A lot of people didn't know who the fuck Theo Von was prior to this. And
I still don't. I mean, I didn't really pay attention to the platform that she was on when she said it. But, go and she just said it, like, I didn't recognize the person.
But to your point from a minute ago, a lot of people did. A lot of people didn't know who the fuck Theo Von was.
Yeah, I mean, and I get it, but because here's the deal, my rebuttal to you was, even if he shuts her down, it's still going to be very newsworthy. She says it, and he comes back and is just like, "Bitch, are you fucking out of your mind? You don't think that that's not going to draw the same?
No, how
wouldn't it? That would have, because she still says what she says, right? Like, I mean, I'm not like he didn't need to. But he still could have, like, once she makes the statement, but it should happen now because Jews ruin everything, instead of, aren't you Jewish? If he's just like, that is some of the dumbest shit I've ever heard. Why would you say that knowing goddamn well you're Jewish, right? Like, and then she's forced to say, oh, I'm kidding, whatever. But either way, that still makes news. It still is a huge story. And he doesn't come out looking like a fucking,
Cuck?
Yeah, exactly. Well, I don't know.
You were trying to avoid the word that I'll use.
I didn't have a word.
But that's kind of what you're looking at.
Like, the word I had in my head was a yellow spine, and I was like, that's not right.
That's not an accurate term. No one ever said that.
Yeah.
Yellow belly? You're okay.
Yeah, I think I was so yellow. I was trying to get the coward.
And by the way, Theo Von is from the South, so you're yellow would have actually resonated with him. What's the matter, Theo? You yellow?
Oh, shit. Anyway.
But no, I think I do, put myself in the position, we've had guests on our show. Sometimes you were here, sometimes you were not. But there were times when we had, I'm going to throw Kevin Dixie under the bus just because there were times where he said stuff where I had just shook my head and like,
it's one thing that you don't agree or that's different. Like, I mean, he did, like, it's not like he
push
came
back where I would have normally.
But that's different though, right? Because he didn't come, it's not like he said, No, he did
not push back at all.
Right, but what I'm saying is like Kevin Dixie didn't say something that we know is a universal truth, and that was like
he misrepresented something I said, and rather than say okay, you chose a typical talking point, and that's a
big difference though, right? Okay. Like Roseann Barr said that the Holocaust, which we know for a fact existed because there are people who survived it, not to mention the actual images that we have from it, and there are, up until not that, I mean, there may be one or two, a few people, but we've got people with the fucking tattoos still on their skin, and the graves and the soldiers that actually saw it, who fought in World War II. What the fuck was World War II about then? Right? Like, I mean, like, can we get like what? Anyway, but the point is, like, it's universal truth that the Holocaust happened.
Yes,
right, and we know what the result of that was. We know what led up to it. We know that the risk there is just with the Jews standing in the Middle East, how that they are the reason why we're partnered with them because of the threats to them and everything else. The anti-Semitism that has happened in this country alone, like that's a huge difference between what happened on our show. Right, and so it's one thing for you not to push back on something that you said, blah, blah, blah. For him to not push back on just known history, whether she's being, like, then make her say she's being sarcastic and make her own the fact that it was a shitty joke.
That's the right call. Say, all right.
Because I still think it gets play, the same amount of play that it does now, right? Like, you're still going to have people that are disgusted by what she said, right? Like, no one's going to poo-poo, like, oh, well, Theo Von got it, so it's good, right? Like, that's not what would have happened.
True. No, and Roseanne, again, I'm sympathetic to her just because she is so fucked in the head. And I've heard other interviews with her where she is literally the crazy rambling person at the bar. I don't know what substances were being used during that podcast. I will not use them to justify that, since at least
I know she's into cannabis and peanuts.
I know she's into. I didn't know she was a cannabis person, and I know she's got some. I thought it was macadamia nuts.
Oh, maybe it is. Some form of nut.
I think it's a nut in Hawaii.
Right.
I think it's macadamia nuts. But all right, we can go on, or we just call it a night.
Let's call it.
We are at Whiskey Congress on Instagram and Twitter, and we're done. Thanks for listening. We're done.